This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 068.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Good to have you for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. You know who you got. Channeling my inner Jonathan Light here. How are you doing today?
That was pretty darn good, Mike. Appreciate it. Doing well. It's Friday. We got a lot of action happening. No complaints. And even if I did complain, would anybody care to listen? No.
I'd listen, Jonathan.
Oh, I like it. Well, we'll take it offline then.
Okay.
How are you doing?
I am doing very well. We're recording this early December. By the time this episode drops, we will be into kind of, I guess, the home stretch into the holidays, where things are getting kind of hairy, but it's fun. Yeah. You know, we've been doing a lot of stuff that I want to be doing. So that's been fantastic in the business.
Well, and then on the personal side, you've got that focus into that second and third, fourth week of December of taking time off, which is exciting. So I'm sure you're gearing up for that, but you've been on the road lots working too, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been on the road looking at like some real estate. I know, 2 weeks from now, I'm out to Edmonton. I guess the week that this episode comes out, I'll be on the road all week looking at various apartment deals. And that's really where I like spending my time is on the acquisition piece. So I'm excited.
Excellent.
What about you? What's going on?
Oh, everything and anything in a good way. More big picture thinking and planning on some projects that are in the works for next year, 2022 under wraps, which is exciting with Mosaic Group and personal business. It's a good time in the family right now. Jackson to his first hockey tournament this weekend is over the moon excited. Talked about having to get a good sleep last night and another good sleep tonight. He is jacked up and ready to go. So it's a fun time. We've got our first vaccine event happening at the clinic this weekend as well, too, helping with some low income and not a sponsorship, but a partnership with a well worthwhile group here in Calgary. So there is a lot happening.
Nice. You had texted me too. Jack just had his first hockey game ever. Was it ever or just this season?
Well, it's ever, because for us in Calgary, for some reason, we do practices for the first 2 months. And because he's in his second year of Timbits and they got canceled last year due to COVID, he literally just had his first hockey game last Friday. And so now he's full swing hockey tournament this weekend. And the kid is pumped.
Yeah, it is. I mean, wild. I know Riley, we just have in gymnastics, which is the instructor tries to give them instructions, but it's just 2-year-olds running around and it's awesome. But it's, you know, that sport and activity for kids, it's so critical to have it back. So I'm pretty happy to see it back.
It's infectious. They're together with other kids. Like they literally are beating each other up on the ice. And then he gets home and he's just crashed, literally dead, like nothing left for energy. Gets up this morning and is ready to go again. So it's perfect.
Yeah, right on. Okay, well, I guess, we should dive into today's episode. Great conversation.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I'm hoping I catch you off guard, but we'll see.
I have the notes right in front of me.
You got
quick
notes
tip for the day.
Let's hear it.
Quick tips. There's a couple in here, and I'm speaking to the choir here because I'm going through this process right now. We're in the end of year, looking at business, looking at personal life. There are a few things that I know I need to make changes for in 2022. And there's a couple of specific questions I have to answer, which I'm going to share with our listeners today in terms of thinking on their own time. The first is, what do I need to eliminate? What are things in life right now that I need to get off either my plate that I shouldn't be responsible for, or by me doing them actually takes away from the responsibilities? And I've read a couple of great books in my leadership role. There's some unhappy things I have to do, but that's just the way it is. That's the role that I signed up for. That's what I'm doing in leading people. And what other things do I need to eliminate so then I can spend more time? And that's really important as I go into the next year. The second question was, what things am I currently doing that I need to delegate? And there are definitely some of those items that I need to delegate, which is both from a career move within some of the people that directly report to me, as well as in leadership capacity from a career development for those that I work with. And then the last one is, what's neutral in your life? What can you allow for breathing space to listen, to think, to allow for increased capacity? And so those are 3 questions as quick tips I would provide for our listeners to also think about as we come into the end of 2022. That's it.
Nice. Well, that certainly wasn't quick, but I do agree it was quite valuable. So eliminate, delegate, and then what's neutral to where you can leave some space. Did I have that right?
You sure did. Yeah. Leave some space in order to think greater capacity in what you do day to day.
Right on. That almost feels like, man, that could be an episode. We may have to follow up with you here in 2022 and see how you did on those things.
Well, let's go with it.
Okay, nice. So diving into today's episode, great conversation. Dr. Danielle Alleman has been a small animal veterinarian since graduating from the Cornell College of Veterinary Medicine in 2017. She is the owner and creator of Empathos Veterinary Wellness, a program designed to help support the mental health and well-being of the veterinary profession through virtual events, speaking, career coaching, and more. She also serves on the WSVMA Wellbeing Committee, helping to provide well-being resources to members. As a veterinary student, she was part of the group that created the Student Wellness Initiative that exists currently today. When she is not involved in vet med, she enjoys hiking, climbing, skiing, or basically any activity that gets her outside in the Pacific Northwest mountains. This was a fun conversation. It was great connecting with her. Please enjoy this conversation with Danielle Alleman. All right, Danielle, so great to have you on the podcast with us. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me. So excited.
Yeah. So I know we laid out a bit of what we're going to talk about, and certainly we're going to get to know you. We're going to dive into all your wellness stuff, but immediately into a tangent. I was following your Instagram today, and you were training for a 50-kilometer like race or run. And I was like, whoa, I need to hear about this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So in typical like me fashion, I have all these things going on. And then I'm like, what could make my life more chaotic? I know, training for a 50K. Yeah. So it's a local race in my area. I live in Bellingham, Washington, and we have what's called the Chuckanut Mountains. And they're kind of where it's really actually pretty cool because it's where the mountains meet the ocean in this part of the world. And so really unique area. And there's a 50K distance that I just mostly picked to keep me motivated over the winter. It gets so dark and dreary here. The longest race I've ever done is a half marathon. So this is an endeavor. And I had really no interest in ever running a marathon. So I guess I just skipped over all of that and went straight to 50K. But it's all in the woods. And to me, that's different. I like trail running and stuff like that. But it's in March. I officially registered today. We'll see how the next 4 months go.
I love it. I love it. Like as soon as I saw it, I was chuckling at the 50K because I was like, oh, a marathon's just not quite far enough. We gotta go further. And then trail run. So, I mean, that's more difficult than just running on flat pavement. So,
oh yeah, there's like 5,000 feet of elevation gain in this course too. So it'll be a feat, but I still haven't gotten on my run today. I'll do that after this, but gives me something to do this winter.
I love it. Well, I'll be following along. I really enjoy very challenging goals like that you got to dig deep and work at over a period of time. So good for you. So anyway, back on track, I guess where we can dive in for any of our listeners that maybe don't know you. You had mentioned you're in the Pacific Northwest. That is not where you went to school. You went to school on the other coast. So at Cornell, maybe let's dive in. You graduated 2017, I believe it was, packed up, flew across the whole country. Maybe let's dive in there because I know you had some early experiences that have kind of shaped where you're at now.
Yeah. So I graduated in 2017, kind of knew at the end of that school that I wanted to be somewhere different than the Northeast. I originally had interest in doing, I originally had plans to be a dairy vet. Still really do love dairy cows in the dairy industry, and kind of needed to go where the cows were. But I knew I didn't want to stay in upstate New York. And right at the end of clinics, decided I wasn't ready to give small animal up because that part of it was just so interesting as well. And I kind of was one of those people that wanted to do it all just because we can. So I wanted to be mixed animal, and I was ready to be anywhere that allowed me to do that. And I found a job that was mixed animal in kind of eastern central Washington. So moved out right after graduation, and that job was a total risk. It was a small animal practice that was recently acquired by another veterinarian. They hadn't done large animal in a long time, but there are a lot of kind of dairy herds in the area. And they were looking at this, I'm like, oof, Danielle. But they were looking for someone to be a small animal vet and then also kind of build up the large animal side of things with the people in the area, the farmers in the area. And so I moved out there away from, I don't have any friends or family out there. And just started working. And it ended up being mostly a small animal position. As it turns out, when a new graduate, especially like young female vet, shows up on a dairy farm, people are not super interested in having you work for them. So that didn't end up on what I wanted from a mixed animal perspective. But that job was also, I think, like so many new grads, we kind of just get really excited that someone offers a position literally anywhere, and take it, even if looking back, there were maybe some red flags that I should have picked up on.
Can we go into that a little bit, Danielle?
Yeah.
Because I think it's very useful at this time frame when this episode is going to be airing, because there are a lot of new grads doing exactly what you did there 4 years ago, is they're searching for that job as we speak. So in looking at going across the country, a couple of questions is, how did they get a hold of you, or how did you find out about the position? And outside of it being a mixed animal role, which you were looking for at the time, what was there that attracted you to the role?
It was, so I guess I found the job posting. I was just looking on like state VMA boards. I think I found it on the Washington State job posting. And I was really open to anywhere in Oregon, Washington, and actually BC as well. Just anywhere to get me out there. And to be honest, I'm not really sure. I think I was attracted by, looking back, I was just like so excited about the location. And kind of the fact that I could be literally anywhere in the Pacific Northwest and also be doing mixed animal medicine. I think that was something that excited me most. I can't tell you that it was like a very fancy salary or even benefit package. Like, not even that was great. I just was like so drawn in by the possibility. And looking back, like it got me out here, and I love it out here, and I wouldn't change anything, but I think I was just like so excited about the possibility of what could have been. And it wasn't any of those things. And so that was kind of walked into it knowing it could be like a huge risk and failure on my end. And it turned out to be both of those things. But
do you think you were cognizant of that risk and potential failure, or those possibilities of geographical change just outweighed them all and off you went?
I think a little bit of both. I think there was a lot of me, even kind of mentors and people in vet school, when I kind of told about that first job, they were like, Danielle, I don't know this is a good idea. But like, sometimes you just have your mind so set on something that it really doesn't matter what anybody else says. And I find that talking to the practice that I worked at previously had a lot of externs and fourth year externs, and talked to them a lot about, because now I'm really passionate about talking to fourth years about their job search experience. And they seem the same way. Like, sometimes I can see those red flags and I can tell them to be a little wary, but at the end of the day, if they're excited about it, like, sometimes you just got to go for it and see what happens. And it could have worked out great. Just for me, it didn't. But there wasn't anything unique. I think it was just the possibility of what could have been.
Nice. I like that. So from there, what was the sort of next step in your evolution? So that was first practice. It's maybe not working out. Where did you go next?
Yeah, so that job I was working, it was me and another new grad in a practice with our kind of mentor working at a different practice about 30 minutes away. So mentorship was challenging. We were on call every other day and then every other weekend. So basically like 50% of the time. And pretty active on call. Like I was often called in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. That got pretty old pretty fast. And I also worked 11 days on, 3 days off, which at the time I was excited to have a 3-day weekend somehow. And so after 10 months of that was like, oh my gosh, this isn't sustainable. Didn't realize really like how unsustainable it was at the time, but I was just looking to get out of there. And that's when I made the decision just to do small animal medicine. I wanted to be a young person that was could be in a place that I could meet people and have a little bit more of a social life and things like that. And that looked like moving somewhere close to Seattle for me. And also kind of like my outdoor recreation side has grown and grown and grown since I've been out in Washington, is one of the reasons I moved out here. And so I wanted to be somewhere where that could kind of thrive as well. Kind of the realization that I'm not just a veterinarian, I also have other hobbies. And so that was the first time I ever really made a decision, not just for my career, but also what I wanted out of life. And that looked like a job that was small animal only. That was 4/10s, a 4-day work week, really minimal on call. And it was only by phone and never had to go in. A big practice with lots of mentorship, just like all the things, and living where I live now, which is Bellingham, Washington, which is a really fun little outdoor community with a lot of young people and that kind of thing. So it was kind of that transition. And I was at that job for the next, 3 years.
Nice. May I ask one more question about your first job, which I think is both relevant to employers and employees listening? When you realized that both the schedule and the time on call was not sustainable, was there a conversation that happened with your employer? If so, how did that go? And if not, why not?
I do remember asking if there were times, because there was a sister clinic about 30 minutes away. And I remember we kind of asked if there was a way that maybe one person could be on call for 2 clinics just every once in a while to get some people a break. And that wasn't really received favorably. It was kind of the old, like, well, we've always been doing like this, or kind of like, I do it like this, so you should be able to as well. Okay. So that wasn't received very well. But I have to say, looking back, like compared to what I know now, I didn't advocate for myself all that hard, just because kind of a new grad and asking for what you want is really scary. Yep. And I don't think that there was much of a conversation. There was lots of other things too, but yes. Definitely it's more of like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. And instead of kind of having the conversations that I would have had later in my career, I just was like, I gotta go. I'm out of here.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that happens a lot. And that is relative to both the experience, time, and career, as well as just the situation you find yourself in. So thanks for sharing that. And you're definitely not alone in chatting with lots of students or recent grads.
Yeah. And I like, like when you were making the move, and we talked about like there was red flags, and then in hindsight, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. The sort of silver lining on it is, it's not a catastrophic event, right? You recognized it. You were able to pivot relatively quickly, find a better role, move into it, find an environment that fits you better. So, I mean, certainly being aware of the red flags, I think for everyone looking, is obviously a good idea. But even if you get off track a little bit, we can correct. So I'm happy to hear your next role, had a lot more check marks, in alignment for you.
Yeah. And that was the thing is having that first job taught me very, very quickly what I didn't want. And I was a lot more clear, like 10 months after graduation, of being like, this is the schedule I want. This is the environment I want. This is the mentorship I want, and that kind of thing, because I just got thrown into it in that first job. And so I think, it was night and day between first job and second job. And I think that was because of the experiences I had right at first to be like, okay, I now can get a lot more clear about what I'm looking for.
Heck, people take decades to figure that out. It's impressive. The first 10 months.
I know. I'm kind of laughing. I was like, you did in 10 months what took me 10 years. It feels like. Yeah. Okay. So diving in. So now the next role, and I think you were there for 2 or 3 years or somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. Let's dive into how that went. And then I know that led to the transition into some of the stuff you're doing now.
Yeah. So that next job was everything I needed it to be really for the next couple of years. We were a big small animal, actually mixed animal practice, but doctors were either small animal or large. And I chose small animal, and it was great. We had 2 locations. The culture was night and day. Everybody was very supportive, like between 10 and 15 doctors. So really a whole lot of people around to kind of help out. All those things. And I was in that, I think because of my experience in my first job, I stayed in that honeymoon period of my second job for like 18 months. Like I would hear kind of whispers of issues that people had or whatever. And my second job was wonderful, and I'll never really say all that much bad about it, but I truly was like, this is the best job there could ever be for the first like 18 months I was there, just because it was so night and day different. But after maybe about 18 months, like I found myself being just continually really exhausted and really starting to resent my clients. And that was the practice that had a lot of externs. And I started realizing that when they were around, I just was having a hard time. I love teaching and I love supporting and helping people. And I wanted the students to go away. Like I just didn't want them there. I couldn't put on a brave face for like how excited I was about the profession. And looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, you were so burnt out. But at the time I just was like, oh, this must be the cynicism. And like, this is just what it's going to be and stuff like that. And that happened once, I think maybe 18 months in. I had a winter where things kind of slowed down and I felt better and I was excited about work again. And then the next summer, things got really busy. End of the summer, again, really exhausted, really cynical, really hating on my clients. Shouldn't say hating on my clients, but like they were frustrating me a whole lot. I was blaming a lot of things on them, like I think many of us do. And it kind of was like, I have this job that I really, really like why is this still happening to me? And I started to wonder if I was, cut out for veterinary medicine. I started to wonder like if I had just followed this one track path my whole life, and had not really seen what else was out there, and had this like existential crisis at like 2 to 3 years out of school. Like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Yep. And for one reason or another, I ended up going to the AVMA Wellbeing Summit in 2019. And that was a huge eye opener for me. I got to listen to like Elizabeth Strand and like just a bunch of really wonderful speakers, and kind of gotten to be in an environment where people were really excited about veterinary medicine again, but then also to hear from people that like explained what burnout was, explained kind of what was responsible. I heard about like just general like self-care, personal development, and like boundaries for the first time, and was kind of like you're responsible for your own well-being and success. You can't always just like blame it on things around you. And I remember coming home from that conference and being like, oh my gosh, just feeling excited about not only just the topic of well-being in general, but also like, what can I do to make this a more sustainable career for myself? And I learned a lot about the like people-pleasing behaviors I had. I learned about the fact that I had absolutely no boundaries with people. And then I would get upset that I felt like they were taking advantage of me. I didn't even like things I didn't even know I was doing. And that was kind of the start of this like well-being journey that now a couple of years later is like me helping others notice those things in themselves.
Yeah. And I'm really excited. I want to dive into that. I have a couple questions around that time. So one would be, how did you handle that? And specifically, I guess what I'm curious about is before going to that conference, was this something that, you just sort of bottle up inside and be like, I don't want to talk to anyone about it for whatever reason? Or did you have like, peers and support people that you could talk to and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. Like, are you feeling this way? And chat it through. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I do have some friends that left clinical practice pretty early on, or maybe never really went into it all that long in general. And so it was nice to have them to be like, I'm feeling this way. And then be like, yeah, I was kind of feeling that way. And I found something else that maybe wasn't clinical medicine. I think the realization that like clinical medicine isn't the only, like going into practice isn't the only way you can use your degree. And in the process of that, actually got excited about, well, what else can I do with my degree, and kind of connecting with people that had done things outside of clinical work. At one point, I got excited about getting my master's in social work. And I ended up connecting with an old professor who I was able to have some conversations with, and was like, hey, I'm feeling really disenchanted with this profession. Like, what now? So there were luckily some people that I had in my life to be like, hey, I'm feeling this way. And their responses to be like, yeah, I felt that way too. And that, of course, that's super helpful to have someone else be like, yeah, I've experienced that as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I was hoping that was the case, because I know it can feel, like you're on a little island by yourself if you don't have that support and people to bounce it off of. So that's good. The other question from listening to that story just now, I'm curious how the shift went in around the blame piece. Because you had mentioned, when you were feeling disenchanted, maybe feeling like you're blaming others, and then you go and, meet with some experts, and all of a sudden you start looking at, wait a minute, I can take responsibility for this and make some changes, because that can be a really hard hurdle to clear.
Mm-hmm. I think it was something about, to be honest, I'm not really sure when that shift happened. I think maybe it was the realization that it's far more empowering to realize that you can do something about your own situation rather than waiting for someone else to do it for you. Like, I think something about, probably something the way someone said something at that conference was like, oh, wait, actually the power, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of the power is actually in my hands. And if you just get out of your own way sometimes. And then it was like subsequent learning and personal development for months and months beyond that. But that first idea of, it's never pretty to realize that it's actually you that's getting in your way a lot of the time. But I think it was that empowerment piece of like, if I can do something and I don't have to wait on somebody else, that's actually way better for me.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love how you said that. I'm going to be rewatching that one piece specifically, because that was awesome.
I was thinking inside my head, that's our quote for the episode right there, because it was so eloquently well spoken right there. Yep.
Yeah, that was amazing. So, okay,
let's make it real for 2021, by the way, on the veterinary project. This is the non-existent real has just become real.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's keep, running with that, because you can see it. And I know when I talked with you, so, kind of, we'll say like the light bulb has gone on. You've realized you can empower yourself. This passion catches fire of personal development. So where did you take that, and where have you taken it, all the way up to current day?
Yeah. I think at the time, so then, right, this was fall of 2019. I attended this conference. I start kind of like doing my own things over the winter and the spring and things like that. And then COVID happened, which I think it was a lot of things, right? But I think if anything, it was a time for a lot of us to really focus on exactly what was important to us and what we wanted to be doing and like placing our energy. And yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I had this idea of master's in social work, and then it was kind of like, no, but I don't want to pivot out of veterinary medicine completely. I want to stay in it. So like, what does that look like? And kind of tossing around ideas of like what that looks like in my head. And I remember telling a friend, like, I just want to help people that feel like this profession isn't for them rediscover that feeling that they felt right when they got into vet school, or that feeling that they felt when they were a kid and they were so excited, or right before graduation when they couldn't wait to get started. Like, I just was so upset that I had lost that feeling. And I was like, I just want to help people get that feeling back. And I had no idea that people were even doing anything on social media or otherwise in kind of that vet well-being space. I was like, nobody's doing this. So what am I doing? And kind of the pandemic was a time for me to kind of figure out what like maybe I wanted that to look like. And it was always this idea, well, I'll stay in practice maybe for 5 to 10 more years. And then maybe I'll think about doing something in the veterinary well-being space. Like it was always like this far off thing that I was going to do. And then just like the more time that COVID went on, and it was like, if not now, like why not now, basically. Kind of that everybody feeling really overwhelmed and burned out, and just seeing how many people were really struggling through the pandemic. Unfortunately, as we always do, kind of seeing kind of the losses that we have in our profession, people that have died by suicide or taken their own lives, things like that. And specifically, I ended up losing a classmate kind of mid to later on in 2020, and just had this like, why am I waiting 5 to 10 years? Like, why can't I just start doing something now? I'm passionate about wellness and well-being. It is something that actually at my job at the time, me and my team and technicians had started talking a lot about, and had kind of created this environment where we talked about boundaries and we talked about kind of what we all needed and open communication and things like that. It was kind of all these things that was like, let me just maybe start something, and I don't even know what that is, but my resolve in November of 2020 was I'm gonna start an Instagram page. I'm gonna post twice a week, and I don't even know about what, and I'm just gonna share my ideas, and we'll see what happens. That was how that started. That's how Empathos started. It's just like, I don't know, something. I gotta do something.
And sorry, just to jump in, like that's making me smile a lot, because I really feel like people will look at and like, you know, quote unquote successful. So you have an Instagram, you have a following, you know, you're doing your thing, and it's easy to look at it and be like, well, she had it all mapped out before she started, you know, and really the truth is, to a lot of people, they're like, I had no idea. I just started. Mm-hmm. And it ended up where it ended up. Yeah, exactly. And it's still evolving to where I want it to end up. Yeah. And but I'm glad I started. Exactly. And I think that's amazing. And you had said, you know, deciding where you want to place your energy. And I think, again, you worded that so well, you know, because there's 24 hours in the day. Everyone knows that. It's how are you going to expend your energy like within that time to align with you. So, I mean, I'm glad you got started. So what does that look like now? So, I mean, I would love to say, okay, we get through COVID. I mean, I don't know if we are or not, or when that's going to be, but in 2021, you know, what does that now look like? Because I know you did some really cool things. I'm going to totally butcher the name. You had the Eudaimonia conference that you just launched. You're like, I'm going to do a wellness conference. Yeah. So 2021 was kind of a combination of just like, really, to be honest, tapping into that like really awesome, there's a really awesome like veterinary well-being community, particularly on Instagram. Like I never, like if you had asked me a year ago, like, are you going to be friends with a bunch of like veterinary well-being people on Instagram and have like friends, I would have been like, no, that's insane. Because I was never really a huge social media person prior to this account. So the fact that it's gone this far is amazing. But basically just like talking with more people, things like that. I did a couple of workshops, a couple of like group courses, things like that, was trying to figure out what that looks like. I had enough need and I was spending enough time on all this stuff that I actually couldn't sustainably keep my full-time job and do this, which was great. That happened a lot sooner than I thought it would. And so in June, I ended up leaving my job full-time, and now I do relief, and that gives me an opportunity to kind of do a little bit of both, which is really nice. And also all my interest in kind of like well-being, but also like workplace culture and teams and communication and things like that. Super fascinating to be a relief vet, because you just get to be like the fly on the wall, and see lots of different practices. So that's been a lot of fun. In the spring I was like, I don't know,
I want to do a well-being conference. I decided that in May. We just did it in November, had about 300 people show up to that in some capacity, 15 speakers that were all, we did it all. I did it all for free because I was too overwhelmed to do anything else. But just the process of going through like putting on a virtual event was actually a lot of fun. And I'm like, I could do this every year. This is actually a really great way to build community. And sometimes just what I really wanted was to have a space where people could talk about things that I thought would actually be really helpful on like a culture and well-being front. Like sometimes I'm the person that goes to a vet conference and like attends as many of the medical related lectures as I need to. And then I spend the rest of my time in like the well-being section. So there are really, really excellent talks that happen at those conferences, but I remember going to some that were talking about doing like a well-being challenge at your practice and like buying everybody pedometers and seeing how many steps they could get in. And I was like, I didn't know why that bugged me at the time, but now I'm like, I guess it's one more thing on the list that we just don't have time for and doesn't actually help. So I wanted just people to talk about like what are real meaningful, like easy things that we can do to kind of improve our own well-being, but also our workplaces, things like that. So we had lots of awesome speakers talking about like, what is psychological safety and why is that important in medical environments, and imposter syndrome and managing incivility, and just all these really kind of different topics and group of people. We had some financial wellness type stuff too. Just a lot of really awesome people and a great event. So that was, again, something that I never really had plans for, but I had an idea flying on a plane once. And so I was like, I'm just appreciating that I will try anything once. So
I love
that was something that ended up working out, and I'm excited to do it again next year.
It's funny how that is. You flying on a plane. It's like, you need to get in those environments where it's like, okay, you can't do anything. You're stuck in this airplane, like you actually have some space and some time to yourself. And I don't know about you, but that for me, that's when the best ideas flow, right? Because you can't.
The best ideas on planes.
Yeah.
Specifically planes. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, they lock you in there. They don't let you out
Right.
until you have an idea. So, I mean, and then you pulled that off really fast. Like you said, May, like within 6 months from sort of concept to execution, like that's impressive.
And I thought she was going to say maybe 20 or 30 people. 300 is a decent number.
Yeah,
that takes some logistical planning.
What have I done?
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm curious, I guess maybe tactically, and you can take it in sort of whatever area of wellness you want, but what were some of the common themes maybe discussed at that conference? Like some of the high level big takeaways.
Yeah, I feel like I liked it because we had a little bit of both of like, what can you do for yourself? But then also what workplaces can do and like how we can change culture. So we had, boundaries came up quite a bit, like cultivating confidence. We did some mindfulness stuff. It was funny. I feel like we didn't have a specific lecture on this, but in almost every lecture, toxic positivity came up, which is like everything is fine and sunshine and rainbows. You're all doing great. And like how that's not awesome.
I have never heard this term toxic positivity. I've got to hear this.
Yeah.
I got to go into this. You guys are both looking at me like I am a weirdo. But I'm sure there are listeners that are thinking the same as me. Tell me more. What is this?
Yeah. So toxic positivity is kind of those like blanket statements of like, everything is great. Look on the bright side. Just kind of like, and particularly when people are maybe expressing that they need help or are struggling in some way, and you're like, but just look on the bright side. Like if someone's ever said something positive and it kind of fills you with rage, but you're not really sure why, like it's probably toxic positivity because it's kind of like negating or ignoring people's alternate emotions that may, it's that like good vibes only we have to be happy all the time feeling.
I like it. I got to look into this.
Yeah. And it was, I think, understandably, how a lot of teams dealt with the beginning of COVID, of just like, you've got it, keep going, you're doing great. And then that worked for a little bit of time because COVID was like a thing that we could overcome. And then like now we're going on year 3, and like your positivity doesn't work anymore. Like, you can't just tell us all just like, keep going, you're doing a great job. It's not awesome.
From the employer standpoint, I'll speak about this as an employer.
Yeah.
Really hard. It's difficult because I think I have putting this on the spot on the podcast. I know I've done that. And then you go from the employer standpoint, we need to evolve, but where are we evolving when there's so many unknowns out there right now? And I found being very truthful and honest with that has helped a lot this year, especially in 2021, where we still don't know.
Yeah.
Every week on our weekly managers meeting, let's discuss about what's happening out there and what are our continual unknowns we have to deal with. That's allowed for a lot better conversation this year.
Yeah. And I think like a lot of the ways things came up is like, often like nobody's being toxically positive because they're like have any malicious intent or anything like that, right? Like we're all just like, I want the best for you, and so everything's great. But there was a lot of conversation around like, yeah, just being like open, honest, and vulnerable. And sometimes I feel like we're positive because we don't really know what the answer is. And so we're just like, I'm going to slap some positivity on it and like make it better. And I've done it too. Like I've done a lot of like, everything happens for a reason and like look on the bright side. And now looking back, I'm like, oof, but I didn't know what else to say. And I think that there was multiple conversations around like, what does like vulnerability look like? Like what does actually meeting people where they're at? What does validating people's feelings look like? Even if you don't know the answer, like we don't always have to know the answer. Yeah. And that's what we can't. It's like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. There's no way to know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And that's why these conversations are important, because I know I've definitely done it, but it's one of those things like you don't know what you don't know. And then once you know, you can start to build on it, and expand your sort of toolbox and, honor how others are feeling more appropriately. But it's difficult. Like, yeah, we could be having the COVID talk in 2022, 23, like who knows? Like it's just doesn't end. But
right.
So I guess moving forward, because we are coming up to the end of 2021, what is kind of on the radar? Like where does this, wellness and Empathos Vet, sort of brand and passion, where are you taking that?
Yeah. So definitely want to do another virtual conference next year. One of the things I ended up doing is kind of in all of this, it's like, okay, I'm a DVM and that's really important because often when I had received wellbeing resources in the past, what seemed to be missing was kind of the lens through someone who's actually experienced veterinary medicine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I want to be that and be relatable to people, but I also have been trying to figure out like how I can further education for myself to kind of figure out where I want to go. So back in June, I got life coach certified just as a way to kind of be able to get a little bit more into like coaching, particularly for early career vets who are kind of feeling the ways that I was feeling. I'm doing the veterinary human support certificate through the University of Tennessee social work program. Working on that. I want to get kind of a certificate in organizational psychology, just some additional things to really kind of have like a well-rounded knowledge around all these things. Have done a little bit of public speaking at like conferences or for, I chatted with the Rhode Island VMA yesterday. I've done some student groups, things like that, trying to get more into that, more into leadership. So I just got elected to the board of Vivaldi. So that's exciting. And yeah, that's a lot of stuff already, I guess. And I'm still working in practice. So
yeah, your plate is full. Well, no, that's amazing. I'm looking forward to following along. And I think I in 2021, I had heard of your conference like last minute, but I'll definitely be looking forward to that, in 2022, because that sounds amazing. So yeah, anything to add, Jonathan, here as we're wrapping up?
I'm excited about the journey. Mike and I were being introspective this morning on a discussion on the way to work, and we were talking about positive and negatives and batteries. And you are what sounds like the perfect example of what Mike was alluding to. You are positively putting action out there and things that you want to be, but you're also being receptive on the negative end to enjoying learning, adding to the skill set, which is very needed in veterinary medicine. And I love the comment you made about having that influence from a person that knows it's been there. We need more of that in veterinary medicine. And to be able to influence from that direction, in my view, holds a lot of credibility and also sustainability for yourself and your career as you make choices going forward. So I commend you for that.
Yeah. And just to clarify, because we had an awesome conversation on the negative piece, it is not negative.
Nope.
In the traditional thinking, when people think positive and negative, what I was meaning with that is negative is like lacking resistance, right? Like just being open to what's going to come, and that's exactly what you've done. And then all these things keep happening. So it's awesome to watch. So, okay, well, with that, we are going to move into our impact round. So a series of questions for you here. First off, are you a cat or a dog person?
Cat person, 100%.
You can see, for anyone that's been on YouTube, I've been watching Jonathan's cat up and down on the chair all episode. True or false? I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian since I was a kid.
Yes, true.
How would your friends describe what you do for a living?
Oh gosh. It always makes me laugh because sometimes I like very briefly just like describe, like, I'm like, oh, I'm a veterinarian, but I also do like veterinary wellness stuff. And there's like a long pause and they're like, for the pets? And I'm like, oh, I have to like for the people. That's always a confusing concept.
Yeah. What is your favorite hobby?
Mountaineering. I've gotten really into climbing mountains of rock and ice and snow variety in the past couple of years. So that's where I spend most of my time, particularly in the summer on the weekends.
Nice. And sorry, just for my own interest, like you're meaning like vertical, like wow, that's always amazing. I can't get there. Well, like there's various like inclines you can go on. So Jonathan's laughing at me here, but it's like, I just can't get there. I'm too scared.
I'm staying G-rated for Mike's benefit right now as a flatlander over there.
Yeah, I'm in.
Who's with anything mountains. Vertical?
Yeah. All right, let's move on. What in this world are you most grateful for?
I am most grateful, I'd say, for my support system. I feel like over the years, you can't do this profession without a whole lot of support, and so having friends, family, pets, partner, all those things, really supportive people. I couldn't do any of this without any of them.
Yeah.
No
doubt. Okay. Well, as we wrap up here, I am sure there's people that are going to be wanting to reach out or follow along. Where would be the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, mostly on Instagram these days. So at empathos.vet. Also free to email me, Danielle@empathosvet.com. And then my website that is ever changing and evolving. I like finish it and then I realize that I need to update it in some way because something's changed. But that's empathosvet.com.
Fantastic. And we'll get those in the show notes for everyone. All righty. Well, thanks again. And as always, the final word goes to you. What message would you like to leave for the veterinary community?
I would say that this profession can really be anything you want it to be. I think I had a pretty narrow lens of what a veterinarian was kind of in school and shortly after graduation. But the more people I talked to, the more I realized that like your career can be as unique as you are. And if you haven't found what you're looking for, just keep looking. Like this profession is so awesome. And there's so many things that you can do. So just keep an open mind and find something you really like so that I want to see more people stay in the profession long term and enjoy it. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly, so be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.